Nelson Mandela. Free, 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 Nelson Mandela.
Hello, I'd like to introduce some thoughts in English in my blog, and I would like to begin to dedicate this effort to translate my philosophical thoughts in English to my fellows of South Africa and in the memory of Nelson Mandela. And I'd like to talk about how we perceive the other nowadays and how we can think about the other and the place of the others in our lives and how we relate to one another. And so recently, during my journey in South Africa in March 2009, I discovered a book written by a very interesting journalist and photographer from Poland who traveled all over the world and particularly in Africa. Ryszard Kapuscinski. I bought the book in Cape Town and read it once while returning from Africa, and I warmly recommend it. It's the other in edition by Verso in New York. I learned that the other is his last book. The author died quite recently in 2007. And the book was translated after his death in 2008. I also read that a major part of his work was still in process of being translated. In his book, Kapuscinski quotes very often the anthropologist Malinowski and the philosopher Levinas, that I am very fond of. He speaks of the necessity of developing an anthropological view in journalism and has a very interesting understanding for us philosophers of the concept of the other and what he calls my other. According to him, at this point of a period of accelerated increased migration had set in, when millions and millions of people moved to the cities, and that mainstay of tradition, the village, was depopulated, and its people was decimated by famine, civil war, droughts, and epidemics. The person we meet and get to know in the big cities of the Third World is already another other, the product of an urban, hybrid culture that is hard to define, the descendant of various contradictory words, a composite creature of fluid, impermanent contours and features. Nowadays, it's exactly this kind of other we are usually dealing with. Similar to the author, I too discover, with the help of our tourist guide, the existence of the large Cape Townian township, where about 2 million people are living. They seem to me near and similar to the favelas of São Paulo, the township resembling the place nearby where I taught for several years in a university, Unifiel, located near the suburbs of the town. Those zones of poverty and despair near the urban centers are venues of violence, drug market, corruption, and they are now a global phenomenon, which, according to the author, tends to develop itself and spread all over. He describes the archipelagos of all sorts of ghettos and camps spread about our planet. He also noticed, as I did, observing the commercial relationship between Chinese and South African, that a new order has been born, a non-European who is other in relation to another non-European. According to his observation, such relationships and exchanges are developing between people from Africa and Asia, for example, or between people from Pacific Islands and the Caribbean. Trying to fully participate in the international dialogue and the world economical future, the author notes that the stranger, the other, in his third word incarnation, and so the most numerous individual in our planet, is still treated as an object of research, but has not yet become our partner, jointly responsible for the fate of the planet in which we live. And he is especially thinking about all these people on the ghettos of the big towns. So one of my philosophical questions is, how can we include those populations and consider them jointly responsible for the fate of the planet on which we live, and not as objects? Explaining to us his desire for an anthropological interpretation of our world, he observed the important role played by the masses. First, there is a mass culture, a mass hysteria, mass state, or rather, according to him, lack of taste, mass paranoia, mass enslavement, I beg your pardon, and finally, mass murder. Kapuscinski studied a lot the lapidarian problem. The only hero on the world stage is the crowd. This mass, with its anonymity, its impersonality, lack of identity, lack of faith, the individual is lost in the crowd, the mass has engulfed him, and the waters of the lake have closed over him. To use Gabriel Marcel's term, he has become the nameless, anonymous person in a fragmentary state. So, returning to Canada, after a 28 hours journey during which my husband and I had an uninterrupted flight of 20 hours and waited on 3 crowded airports with a long stop in Holland, I said to myself that this word has nothing to do with a global village. I was simultaneously impacted by the amazing beauty of South Africa and the crisis that is shaking the African continent, very well described by Kapuscinski. With the disappearance of the tribe's habitat and the end of the village era, and this new form of slavery in the poverty zones of the big cities and its modern factories. Malinowski's problem was how to get close to the other if he's not a purely abstract creature, but a specific person belonging to a different race, with his own beliefs and values that are different from ours. His own culture and customs. According to the author, culture is becoming increasingly hybrid and heterogeneous. With regard to the expression, the global village, that he considered, as I do, one of the greatest mistakes of modern culture, he comments, the essence of a village depends on the fact that its inhabitants know each other well, commune with each other, and share a common fate. Meanwhile, nothing of this kind can be said of our planet. In this sense, we are on the same boat. Every one of us living on this planet is another in the view of the other. My last impression of South Africa, in order to understand a culture, as Malinowski said, is that you have to be there, and I was not there for long. There are at least 6 languages spoken in South Africa, many tribes, different kinds of apartheid, which is in fact a very ancient European phenomenon. And as Nelson Mandela beautifully said, it is a long walk for freedom. I was fascinated for this country, of course, and I miss South Africa somehow, as if a treasure was hidden there, in the essence of these lost villages that I wasn't able to find, in the very heart of the people with whom we shared some time of our life, even if it was only for a few days. Thank you for your attention, and I hope to meet you soon in a next video.
Free Nelson Mandela.